You were taught, with regard to your former way of life, to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires. When Paul wrote to the Ephesian believers, he presented a powerful image of spiritual transformation. This verse appears in a larger context, where Paul urges Christians to live differently from their pre-conversion days. The metaphor is striking, putting off the old self like one removes worn-out clothing. This old self isn't merely bad habits or occasional mistakes. Paul describes our former nature as fundamentally corrupted by deceitful desires. These desires promise fulfillment, but deliver emptiness, promise freedom, but bring bondage. They are deceitful because they distort reality, making destructive choices seem appealing. Consider Thomas, a man whose old self was defined by his explosive anger. For years, his rage gave him a sense of power and control. People walked carefully around him, and he believed this respect validated his behavior. But his anger was deceitful. It actually isolated him, damaged his relationships, and left him spiritually empty. When Thomas encountered Christ, he began the difficult work of putting off this old self, recognizing the lies his anger told him, and embracing the patience and gentleness of his new nature. Notice Paul's emphasis that you were taught this truth. This wasn't optional information, but essential doctrine. Early Christian instruction included not just theological concepts, but practical guidance on how to live as new creations in Christ. The word Paul uses for put off suggests a decisive, intentional action, like stripping away a filthy garment. This isn't gradual improvement, but radical transformation. And yet Paul recognizes this is an ongoing process, as the old self continues attempting to exert influence through its corrupting desires. In the verses that follow, Paul explains that we must also put on the new self, not merely removing the old, but embracing a new identity created in God's likeness. This new self is characterized by righteousness, holiness, and truth, qualities that reflect God's own nature. Today, I invite you to honestly examine your life. What aspects of your old self are you still wearing? What deceitful desires continue to influence your choices and attitudes? Identify one specific area where you need transformation. Remember, putting off the old self isn't about willpower alone, but surrendering to God's transforming power. Take a moment right now to pray, asking God to help you recognize and remove those old patterns.